Good afternoon. Let me know if my voice doesn't carry. I think I speak loudly, but maybe not. So I was asked to speak to you with regards to shellfish diseases. I will also, in addition to providing a summary of the pathogens that are of concern for us in the state of Maine, provide you with a summary of findings that we've had through pathogen surveillance programs in the state of Maine for the last decade, providing information with regards to which pathogens exist, what diseases we've had or may have, and also hopefully provide some insight for future consideration. So there are a dozen or more different pathogens and diseases that affect each bivalve species. For us, there are several that are of importance, in part because they are either present in our waters or are present in waters to our south. Well, one that's of most greatest interest has been Haplosporidium nelsoni, or MSX, in oysters. Here it is, numerous parasites in the gill of a bivalve, affecting the surrounding tissue as well. This has been of greatest interest for us, in particular because of the mortality event that occurred in the River in 2010. The parasite has been reported in the state of Maine for quite some time, but oftentimes without any mortality or disease. But it has been present, along with its sister organism, Haplosporidium costale, or SSO, reported both several times in the state. Like I said, without mortalities until the event in 2010. Another agent that has been of concern has been Rosia varius crossospia, the causative agent for juvenile oyster disease, or Rosia varius associated disease. This has become less significant over the years, in part because of growing practices and also the use of disease-resistant lines for oyster culture. Another organism of concern is Pertussis marinus. It's also called dermo. This is prevalent in waters to our south, along the eastern U.S. coastline, Gulf of Mexico. It affects not only oysters, but also clam species. It can cause high mortalities. We have thus far not detected infection with this agent in our shellfish that we've tested, but we need to be on the lookout. There are other diseases that occur that affect different species. Neoplasia, which was mentioned this morning, in mussels and clams that we see every once in a while. Another agent of concern is QPX, which affects clam species, and that exists to our south in Massachusetts. And we need to be on the lookout for that as well. This is the typical distribution map that we see for the typical oyster pathogens. Due to our cold waters, we have been in part protected from these. As we know, they do venture up and they can cause disease as well. But to date, it has not been a huge problem for us. But with the changing environmental conditions that we see in the Gulf of Maine, a lot of these pathogens are temperature dependent. The story may change over time. Some of the things that we need to be concerned about is, as temperatures or pH or other factors change in the Gulf of Maine, is the permissivity of the host species, as well as the pathogen transport, survival, length of time that it's infective, as well as the health of the host species in terms of, are they permitting the infection to occur, are they able to fight the infection to get over it, and how is their growth cycle. So immediately following the 2010 Damerscata disease and mortalities in both wild and aquaculture oysters, Department of Marine Resources conducted a surveillance program up and down the coast. There were between 14 to 15 sites that were sampled in addition to a number of wild oyster sites. In 2010, we saw through this testing multiple sites. Those sites noted in red are those that were found to be positive for MSX. So Damariscotta River, naturally that was the center of this epizootic at the time. It was positive in terms of both cultured and wild populations. Then we have a population in the Sheepscot River that showed up to be positive, and suspect detection in the New Meadows. Subsequent years testing continued to show MSX presence in the Sheepscot and Damariscotta rivers, and the appearance of SSO, Aptosporidium postale, which we had not been seeing that much previously. And in subsequent years, we see an increase of SSO detections. MSX continues to show up, but more in wild oyster populations and in numerous sites along the coastline. And in our most recent surveillance this past fall, we see MSX in wild populations, along with still a suspect in the New Meadows River and the persistence of SSO. The threat doesn't end with just MSX infection in oysters. We've found that rib mussels that were co-occurring with infected oysters in the Marsh River, this was a wild population of oysters, we're also showing infection with MSX. This was the first time report for this species. There are other exotic species that have shown up and through just routine testing. This was in Massachusetts, Bonamia exitiosa, which is thought to be endemic in the southeastern U.S. and has some global presence, was detected in nursery oyster stock. This pathogen is found in other locations around the globe in other species. This was the first detection in the American oysters in the north. It has since been detected again in 2018, but before in previous years was dormant or non-detectable. But this time it was detected in 3 different sites, again on nursery oyster stock. Clams and scallops that were present at the same site were not found to be positive for the pathogen. Some of these pathogens are listed by the World Animal Health Organization as exotics. Their transport and movement around the globe is to be restricted. And with these, such as Bonamia exitiosa, Princess marinus, we are required as a USDA-approved lab to report this to both the state agencies and USDA for reporting to the OIE. Along with the changes in the environment, some other agents that are not necessarily pathogens, but pests such as boring sponges, polychaetes, pea crabs, boring polychaetes, these can also show variations with various environment. As mentioned before, algal blooms have started to occur more often, and these have a double effect on shellfish. One, through biotoxins, which if it are present at very high levels, can also affect shellfish. We found several cases of gaping oysters when levels were high. The others through anoxia and plus mortalities, such as that occurred in soft shell clams in White Bay a few years ago. Vibrio paranolyticus, human pathogen. It's also temperature dependent. That can also show variability. We know it's present along our coastline, so we should be watchful of that. So one thing that we need to make sure is to distinguish between infection and disease. The presence of pathogen does not always mean that there's going to be infection and disease. What we need to do is continue monitoring and have knowledge of what exists in our waters and what species and what that threat level may be. Changes in both the host as well as the pathogen can result in appearance or non-existence of disease and infection. So surveillance is essential for gaining that knowledge and knowing this data. Thank you.